Well, hello, my spooky friends. Today, I am going to tell Scully the story of Aunt Jenny Johnston. It is a wonderful true story, heartbreaking, and it has a big element of the paranormal. And this time, I'm going to start with that. Now, although Aunt Jenny's house burned a long time ago, word is if you go out there at night, a ghostly figure will come with a big stick and chase you off her property. So what kind of ghost would do this? Well, you just had to know Aunt Jenny. So Scully, you better watch out or I'm going to sick her on you. I hope you enjoy this. This comes from my Silky Southern Tea channel. But I have to say, it is probably hands down my favorite story that I've ever done, and I hope you enjoy it too. Let me just tell you, you didn't want to be enemies with Jenny Johnston. She might just make a soap dish out of your skull. We are going to do a video on Southern mysteries, crime, the unexplained, whatever. Today we are going to talk about Jenny Brooks Johnston and what made her so terrifying. You better grab your tea, because this is a rough one. Today's tea is white bark raspberry because it's strong, it's sweet, but it's a little bit tart. And I think that kind of sums up Aunt Jenny. Kind of like this hat. It's a little sweet. Not too sweet. I don't think anybody would actually call Aunt Jenny sweet. For one thing, she might shoot you. And here is my disclaimer. All of the opinions expressed in this video are strictly mine. Alright, this starts back when Louisa Elisabeth Jane Bates was born in Kentucky. Early on in her life, her family moved to North Alabama, where they were kind of well-known citizens, kind of in the upper echelon a little bit. And Jenny was quite a doll. It was said she was half Cherokee, but she had piercing blue eyes, and that really set her apart from her peers. Now, when she was at the tender age of 14, she met a man from Kentucky named Willis Brooks. I reckon they just fell in love. I don't know. But he was 35. She was 14. I don't know what to say about that, because honestly, back in the day, you weren't expected to live that long. 40 was a ripe old age. So everything got started a little bit younger. And apparently they had a good relationship. So after they got married, they opened up an inn and they proceeded to have 9 children. Even though they were innkeepers, with all those kids, it didn't mean that they had a whole pile of money. They were barely getting by. And this is up in Appalachia. Aunt Jenny, as she was called, I don't know why she was called that. We do weird things in the South. Who knows? But anyway, that's how she was known about the town. Aunt Jenny and Willis ran their inn. They were barely making ends meet. And here comes the Civil War. Let me tell you a little bit about Alabama at the time. Contrary to popular belief, not everybody was a Southern Confederate supporter. Yeah, I said what I said. A lot of people really didn't care. First of all, nobody was owning slaves. They were just barely getting by. They were mountain people, rural people. I mean, come on. That was kind of the situation that was going on. Then things got even worse. After the war started, they started the draft. By this time, Willis and Jenny had several sons, and they didn't care about the war. But now the draft was started, and you were expected to go. But what really made people mad was the fact that you could buy your way out of the draft if you had the funds. For $300, you could buy your way out of that draft and just pay somebody else to go for you. $300 was an awful lot of money back in those days. But in their case, even if they had $300, which son were they going to buy out? To make matters even worse, at the time, there were people who were exempt. Your teachers, your clergymen, your war factory workers. There were different groups. And the kicker came when they said if you are a white plantation owner and you owned 20 or more slaves, you were exempt from fighting. Well, honey, that made everybody mad. Again, the South Mostly rural, simple, poor folks. Not a whole lot of slave owners, really. Aunt Jenny and Willis, while they were running their inn, a lot of times deserters would come, Union soldiers would come, different people showed up. It was said that Aunt Jenny was so kind, even if a Union soldier did pass away, she gave him a Christian burial. In the meantime, they're harboring their oldest son, John Brooks, to keep him out of war. Well, I don't blame them. But the Home Guard got fed up. Now, the Home Guard was a group of men that could not be drafted. They were either too old, too young, maybe too stupid. I don't know. Disabled. For whatever reason, they could not go to war. Well, what the government did is they had this bright idea to hire the Home Guard as people who would, watch and kind of police the area, their friends and their neighbors and their peers during the Civil War. It was maybe a little bit like martial law. I don't know. But anyway, people hated the Home Guard. And that's because a lot of times this power just went to their heads and they just went crazy, doing all kind of things, telling you when you couldn't do this and whatnot, and definitely looking to see if your son would be sneaking back out of the war and trying to come home. Well, if you have ever seen the movie Cold Mountain, it came out kind of a long time ago, but it is an excellent depiction of the Home Guard and how terrifying they were. Honey, I never wanted somebody to die so much as I did as that guy in the movie, the white-haired one. Oh, my goodness. I just wanted to reach through that TV and do it myself. Anyway, the Home Guard came calling one night. They had had enough of Willis and Jenny and their shenanigans. So the bullies that they were, they called Willis out, and they took him right outside the house. They bound and tortured him and hung him up in a tree right in front of Jenny and their 9 children. In the meantime, their oldest son, John, comes rushing out the door, and he's going to try to save his dad. And they shoot him cold dead right there. They would live to regret that day. It said there were 8 of the men, and that Jenny looked at him and she says, "I know every one of your faces." And she was going to make sure there was retribution. She wasn't kidding. And I do have to say that life was quite different for women. It was very harsh. People were more harsh. And so some of the things in this story, I don't fault Jenny for a whole lot. I don't know. I get it. I understand. She's taken her husband, her whole provider, and then to add insult to injury, after they killed her husband and her oldest son, they burned down the outbuildings and her home. So all she had was the inn. Don't burn down the booze. Hey, after the Home Guard left and she got a good look at every one of them, she took the body down and then made every one of her kids put their fingers all through the blood of their dead father and take a blood oath that they would kill every single last one of that Home Guard. That's a promise that she would make good on. So what Jenny did after that is she started teaching her boys, how to shoot. She said that she bought many a keg of gunpowder to make sure those boys knew how to shoot. Well, she did such a good job of it that they actually started the Brooks Gang, and that is a whole nother story. It spans several states, and you can find a lot of information on the Brooks boys on the internet. But we're going to focus on Jenny. One day, Jenny and one of her sons went to the Home Guard captain's house, and they were hiding out in the woods, and when he came out of his house and got on his horse, they shot him right off, and then they dragged his body to the woods. And there, Jenny decapitated that Home Guard captain. Not only that, she took his head and she put it in a bag. She took it back to the house. She put it in a big stew pot and she boiled the flesh right off it. Well, when she did, she started picking out all the different parts of it. The jawbone fell off, so she just tossed it away. But now she had a nice, clean, shiny skull, which she used as a soap dish for the rest of her life. The Brooks boys went on their rampage for years, but, one by one, those Home Guard men start disappearing, dying, getting shot. Sometimes they were actually shot by eyewitness that said it was one of the Brooks boys. And to be fair, the Brooks boys did have a rough life, and most of them got shot by somebody at some time. But Aunt Jenny always said she was proud of them because they died with their boots on. You have to make your mama proud. Later on, Aunt Jenny married Jacob Johnston, who was a widower with children of his own, and they remained married until 1897 when he passed away. So in the meantime, Jenny did a lot of good. She was an herbalist, which made some people call her a witch, but she used to help everybody, in the town and country, trying to make them well when they were sick. She was a midwife, and she was known as, a generous person sometimes. It said, and this is a quote by someone who knew her, that Aunt Jenny was a great person if she liked you. But if she didn't like you, she'd just soon shoot you. So I guess that kind of sums up her character. I think we all got a little Aunt Jenny in us somewhere. I'm just saying. Anyway, somewhere down the line, Aunt Jenny found Jesus. And she became a worker in the church. As a matter of fact, she did have a lot of money. I don't know where that came from. Maybe from those Brooks boys gangs and I don't know. I think Jenny had a way of making money. But she donated several acres to the church, and she became a member. And this was in her latter years. I'm not saying Jenny was any saint, but she did have some kind of reformation there towards the end. And I also think that God must have tolerated her because she lived to be a ripe old 98 years old. That was amazing back in those days. One story of Aunt Jenny that I just love is something like this. It's not a direct quote, but it's to this effect. One day, Aunt Jenny came into the General Mercantile, and she had a wallet that was full of money. And that man behind the counter, he asked her where she got all that money. She looked at him and she said this: "I pay myself $20 a week to mind my own business." Well, that shut him up. Jenny knew her way around a gun also, and I don't think anybody was willing to try to take her on. They'd already seen what happened to every one of the Home Guard. As a matter of fact, it was down to the last one. And when he heard that he was the last one alive, he disappeared. Off the face of the earth. Just gone. Maybe it was aliens. I think it might have been Jenny. Anyway, he either went into hiding or Aunt Jenny did get him in the end. One way or another, they all went down. And here is the last bit of tea about Aunt Jenny. And this is pretty amazing. At 98 years old, as she lay dying in her bed, trying to make peace with the Lord, because she was, they asked her if she had any last requests, and she told the preacher, "Yes, sir, I do. I'd like to wash my hands." Ain't nobody gonna argue with Aunt Jenny. They brought her soap dish, which was inside the skull of the captain of the Home Guard. And she washed her hands for the last time before she passed away at her home. Ain't that some tea? Part of me wants to say, "Oh my God." And the other part wants to say, "You go, Aunt Jenny. You show them devils who's boss." Anyway, I'm glad I didn't live back in those times. I mean, sometimes you're just forced to make some bad decisions for good reasons. So what are your thoughts? Tell me if you like this story. Do you think Aunt Jenny was silky or shady? I think she might have been a combination of both, but, what would you do for your kids? I'm not saying a word. I think Aunt Jenny was silky. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story of Aunt Jenny. Remember to like and subscribe. Until next time,